Hello, this is Patrice, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the August 4th issue of the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Trump's fixation on Arctic ships led to billions in no bid contracts. The president decided to buy 11 polar icebreakers after a game of golf with Finland's president. Experts say it's far from clear the United States needs so many. This is an article by Christopher Flavel, Andrea Fuller, and Nicholas Nehamas. Late one night last August, Alexander Stubb, the president of Finland, was at his summer residence 2 hours west of Helsinki when his phone rang. On the other end of the line was President Trump calling with a request. He wanted to buy a fleet of massive ships designed to cut through Arctic ice. Mr. Trump had long fixated on these hulking vessels known as polar icebreakers. He viewed them as crucial to dominating the Arctic, where rising temperatures have put key shipping lanes and vast mineral wealth up for grabs, and he was incensed that the United States possessed far fewer than Russia. 2 months later, Mr. Trump and Mr. Stubb were sitting in the Oval Office to announce a deal for 11 icebreakers worth almost $7 billion to be built by shipyards in both countries. The arrangement was unusual in various ways. The number was twice as many as the Coast Guard, which manages America's fleet, had said it needed. The contracts for building the ships would be awarded without competitive bids. And while 7 of the ships are expected to be built in the United States, the first 4 will be built in Finland, requiring Mr. Trump to waive a law prohibiting construction of national security vessels overseas. At that moment, though, none of that mattered. Mr. Trump wanted more icebreakers and he wanted them from Finland. Other countries have more than we do, Mr. Trump proclaimed as he sat with the Finnish leader, and we're buying the finest icebreakers in the world. The story behind Mr. Trump's personal intervention in Coast Guard ships provides new insights into how his administration has cut corners and flouted rules in pursuit of projects that suit the president's desires, regardless of whether they fit any broader strategic rationale. The reliance on no bid contracts, usually reserved for highly specialized or urgent needs, mirrors other Trump driven projects ranging in scale from the renovations to the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool to a $1.3 billion deal to build a migrant detention center. A New York Times examination of the Coast Guard deal found it relied on personal appeals from Finland's president, Mr. Trump's own view of what constitutes national greatness, along with a fascination with polar icebreakers dating back to a chance encounter in Finland long before he would ever run for president. It also came with no plan to pay for the infrastructure required to support the 11 new ships or the crews to sail them. Those costs are likely to reach into the billions, according to Coast Guard documents. Much of the funding is set to come from money set aside for border security in the Republican spending law passed last year, the One Big Beautiful Bill, which gave the administration wide latitude to pour billions into its priorities with little oversight. To justify no bid contracts for icebreakers, the Trump administration invoked a rarely used exemption claiming the awards are in the public interest, allowing the government to skip competition while saying little publicly about its rationale. We haven't seen any information or analysis to justify the 11 or to assess the long term affordability of these decisions, said Shelby S. Oakley, Director of Contracting and National Security Acquisitions for the nonpartisan U.S. Government Accountability Office. The Coast Guard, she said, risks ending up like a lottery winner who spends all their money buying the mansion and then goes broke once they realize they don't have the money to maintain it. Administration officials broadly defended the ships as essential for national security. Polar icebreakers allow the Coast Guard to maintain what it calls presence in the Arctic, monitoring foreign vessels operating in the region's increasingly strategic waterways. President Trump is restoring America's status as a great Arctic power after previous administrations allowed our ships in Arctic capacity to rust and decay. Allie McCandless, a spokeswoman for the White House Office of Management and Budget, said in a statement, the commandant of the Coast Guard, the Commandant, I believe, of the Coast Guard, Admiral Kevin E. Lundy, said the service abided by laws and regulations to ensure appropriate stewardship of taxpayer dollars. The number 11 came directly from the president, Admiral Lundy told the Times. He said the Coast Guard provided input, but added this was the president's number and the president's. Again, that article is one of probably many articles I'll read today that I've shortened. They're very long if I read them all. If you'd like to hear the entire article, call 716-821-5555. Documents Blanche released to ease path to confirmation leave loopholes. Critics say the written assurances are a political solution to a political problem rather than a legally binding document. This report is by Devlin Barrett. A pair of documents issued by the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche that narrow or dissolve aspects of a deal to resolve President Trump's lawsuit against the IRS have met the demands of two Republican holdouts. Senators Tom Tillis of North Carolina and John Cornyn of Texas refused to support Mr. Blanche's nomination unless he committed in writing to dropping a $1.8 billion fund funneling taxpayer money to the president's allies and putting stricter limits on a part of the plan that provides sweeping protections to Mr. Trump and those in his inner circle from IRS audits. Critics, however, say the written assurances are a political solution to a political problem rather than a legally binding document. This case was flagrantly illegal from the start, and they're clearly trying to find a political way out of it that gets the Attorney General confirmed without giving up their legal rights to actually enforce this illegal settlement, said Matthew Platkin, a Democratic former New Jersey Attorney General. He is now in private practice representing various people suing over the fund. The Justice Department did not respond to a request for comment. For weeks, Mr. Blanche had resisted putting into writing his testimony to lawmakers that Mr. Trump's fund was truly dead, or that the tax protections applied more narrowly than the language in his initial order suggested. But on Sunday night, the administration relented. One of the two documents Mr. Blanche released stated that the order creating the fund is rescinded and shall have no force or effect. The second document limits a provision that gave broad protection to Mr. Trump, his relatives, and related or affiliated individuals from tax audits. The new written order from Mr. Blanche says that the provision only covers the president, two of his sons, and his company, and that it applies only retroactively. Mr. Tillis and Mr. Cornyn said in a statement that the documents assuaged their concerns, ending in an intra-party stalemate that had stalled Mr. Blanche's confirmation process for days. The senators added that they believed the department had acknowledged in a binding written order that the audit protections were limited, addressing concerns that multiple of our Republican colleagues share. Mr. Platkin said that was clearly not the case. He pointed to the original wording of the documents that created what Democrats have called the slush fund that could be used to pay convicted rioters of January 6, 2021, and other supporters of Mr. Trump who have been investigated, prosecuted, or claimed to have been mistreated by the federal government. The original terms of the documents creating the fund said it may be modified only with the written agreement of the parties, a reference to Mr. Trump, his sons Eric and Donald Trump, the Trump Organization, and specific government agencies. The creation of the fund elicited legal challenges in part because it was drafted by private lawyers for Mr. Trump negotiating with lawyers in the Trump administration. The deal was meant to settle Mr. Trump's lawsuit demanding at least $10 billion from the IRS over the leak of his tax returns years ago. It was also meant to settle Mr. Trump's claims made directly to the federal government for $230 million in compensation for past FBI investigations of his conduct. Mr. Blanche and others have argued that judges had no authority to review how it was created or its terms. Mr. Blanche's order, however, is a government document signed only by him, so absent any a new executed agreement that they enter into, all this is meaningless as a matter of law, Mr. Platkin said. For one, an order from the Attorney General can be reversed by a future order from an Attorney General. So in theory, the fund could be revived by the same type of document written anytime after Mr. Blanche is confirmed. Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, echoed those concerns in a statement asserting that the new written promise did not prevent the administration from bringing the slush fund back from the dead next week. He noted that it still leaves vague who and what is covered by tax provisions. How Democratic Socialists are wrestling with their next moves. After notching primary victories, DSA members in Chicago debated whether socialist candidates should be free to distance themselves from goals like abolishing prisons as they chase more seats this fall. This article is by Kellen Browning. When a leader of the Democratic Socialists of America recently appeared on Fox News Sunday and enthusiastically affirmed the group's platform, including goals such as eliminating the U.S. Senate, working toward abolishing prisons, Democratic strategists wrung their hands and Republicans licked their lips. Acknowledging such aims, both parties predicted could hinder progressive candidates and other Democrats painted with an extremist brush in the midterm elections. At the DSA's National Summit in Chicago over the weekend, many Democratic Socialists who had seen the Fox interview felt something different: pride. You're going to have to consistently push and advocate for things that people don't think until they think it, said Shanpreet Singh, a DSA leader from Seattle. Hundreds of members of the group, the country's largest socialist organization, gathered here at a moment of surging political influence, some wearing bright red shirts, swapping their labor strike tips with their comrades, sharing voter turnout strategies and admiring far left merchandise, guillotine earrings, landlords suck, pins, and red roses, a symbol of the group. Many dismissed the notion that their positions could be a political problem and said they felt no need to moderate them. Electoral wins were proof, they reasoned, that Democratic voters were moving closer to them. As an ardent socialist movement has encroached more deeply into the Democratic Party, the DSA backed candidates ousting incumbent Democrats from New York to Colorado and notching other victories this year, the challenges associated with that often fraught cohabitation are coming into sharper focus. Those include questions on each side about the utility of working with each other. Toxic to a broad majority of the country was how Neera Tanden, the president of the Center for American Progress, a Democratic think tank, described aspirations such as prison abolition and doing away with the Senate. She predicted that Republicans would make socialist policies one of their main attack lines. Already, President Trump and other Republican leaders are going further, seeking to brand recent Democratic nominees falsely as communists. The next big test for Democratic Socialists will begin on Tuesday in Democratic primaries in Michigan and Missouri for the U.S. House. And Abdul El Sayed, a progressive doctor who is not a Democratic Socialist but shares many of the DSA's priorities, is running for the Senate in Michigan, a major battleground. A week later is the Democratic governor's primary in Wisconsin, where Francesca Hong, a state assemblywoman and DSA member, is the front runner. Unlike many of the left-leaning areas where Democratic Socialists have won primaries this year, Wisconsin is a perennial swing state. Though she has embraced the DSA label, Ms. Hong has backed away from her own past statements in favor of abolishing the police in the Senate. Last week, she said at a debate that she did not support the full platform of the National DSA and was not endorsed by DSA National. In an interview, Ms. Hong said that it was concerning to me when I'm pigeonholed as the DSA candidate. You can be a Democratic Socialist and be endorsed by your chapter and disagree on other decisions, she added. No one interviewed at the summit suggested the DSA back away from its core ideas, but there were plenty of disagreements over whether the candidates supported by the organization should be required to be open about their socialist affiliation and strictly adhere to every priority in the group's recently updated platform, or if the DSA should allow them some distance as they try to appeal to skeptical voters. There's no expectation that you have to fall in line and agree and parrot the party line on everything, said Cliff Connolly, a DSA member from Orlando who is on the organization's governing council. Some appeared to feel differently. I believe that if she had read the platform and actually knew what was in it, she wouldn't disagree with any of it, Michaela Brangden, a DSA leader in New Jersey, said of Ms. Hong. Again, this article has been abbreviated. Number to call 716-821-5555 to hear it entirely. As a reminder, you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Mamdani may need to find $5 billion more a year for free childcare. A new report by the Center for New York City Affairs projected that a childcare system for all children under 5 could cost the city about $9 billion a year. This is an article by Eliza Shapiro. Mayor Zohran Mamdani's vision for a free childcare system for all New York City children under 5 could cost more than he estimated, according to a new report released on Monday. A new model developed by the Center for New York City Affairs, a nonpartisan research organization affiliated with the new school, estimated that the proposed program would cost about $9 billion annually, with an average cost per child of around $27,000. That's about $5 billion more than the city spent on childcare in 2025. City Hall has not yet released its own cost model. As a candidate, Mr. Mamdani said he thought it would cost about $6 billion per year to create a free universal childcare system for children as young as 6 weeks, regardless of family income. The city currently offers free pre-K for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, with limited seats for 2-year-olds starting this fall. The mayor used the $6 billion figure to argue that the state would need to raise taxes on New York's highest earners to pay for more seats. Free childcare is by far the most ambitious, complex, and expensive piece of Mr. Mamdani's push to expand the city's safety net. The new projection underscores just how difficult it could be to find the money to fund even part of his plan at a moment when families across the city have cited the soaring cost of childcare as a primary reason they are struggling to afford life in New York. But the center's research suggests that it would be next to impossible for Mr. Mamdani to make good on his promise without receiving billions of dollars in new revenue from the state or the federal government, or perhaps both, said Lauren Melodia, the director of the center's economic and fiscal policy work and one of the authors of the report. The roughly $3 billion gap between Mr. Mamdani's estimate and the center's projection is largely attributable to teacher pay. The center's model builds in higher rates that researchers recommend the city pay the child care centers it contracts with. Researchers also found that the city will have to hire about 23,000 new child care workers, mostly to staff classrooms of infants and children under 3 years old. Child care providers and family care centers, small programs run out of private homes, have a median takeaway pay of just $6 an hour, according to a separate report by the center. Jenna Lyle, a spokeswoman for the mayor, did not directly comment on the center's $9 billion estimate, but said the city is committed to getting child care workers raises while also meeting the parent demand for more free care. Delivering on those promises will require additional public investment, and this administration has been clear about that from the start, she said in a statement. The researchers projected that the Mamdani administration would need to create about 10,000 new seats to accommodate the infants and toddlers who are too young to enroll in pre-K right now. The city would most likely be able to meet that demand by relying on New York's patchwork system of family child care centers, but many of those facilities serve families who use vouchers, which are not yet a significant part of City Hall's child care plan. Mr. Mamdani has said he wants to offer free access without any income cutoffs, but the center's report argues that it could be simpler and at least marginally less expensive to incorporate child care vouchers for low-income families, which are already funded mostly by the state and federal government. City Hall could, for example, offer subsidized vouchers to all family in some low-income zip codes, Ms. Melodia suggested. Governor Kathy Hochul has given the Mamdani administration $1.2 billion to jumpstart its program for 2-year-olds in some neighborhoods. City Hall currently has no plan to fund the expansion after next year, besides asking the state for more money. The governor has said she plans to continue to fund the program. We are grateful to Governor Hochul for her partnership and initial investment in this work, said Ms. Lyle, the spokeswoman. Mr. Mamdani and his allies have already promised to renew pressure on the governor to pass a tax increase in Albany on the New York City residents making more than $1 million a year. The center's new estimate might make that task even more urgent. To make its case, City Hall would most likely have to prove that the parents are clamoring for more child care spots. So far, that picture is mixed. Despite Mr. Mamdani's active encouragement, roughly the same number of parents applied this year as last year under former Mayor Eric Adams, who barely advertised the programs. City officials said they were encouraged by parent demand for seats for 2-year-olds. Enrollment data will be released on Tuesday. The extraordinary response to our first 2K application season is proof the demand is there, Ms. Lyle said. Now our responsibility is to meet it. Michigan's tense Democratic Senate race poses a big test for a divided party. Progressives hope momentum by Dr. Abdul El-Sayed will give them a signature victory. Centrists warn that picking him will backfire in November. Acrimony is everywhere. This is an article by Reed J. Epstein and Sam Easter. Democrats' nastiest, most expensive Senate primary will culminate on Tuesday in Michigan, a pivotal midterm battleground where an insurgent progressive is looking to defeat an established back moderate in a contest serving as a referendum on the party's future. The race between Representative Haley Stevens and Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, a former public health official, is charged by tensions over Israel, how to fight President Trump and the GOP, and what makes a candidate electable. The result will factor into the fight for Senate control in November and may have ramifications that extend to the next presidential contest. While polls conducted the last month have shown uncertainty in the competition, several recent public surveys show Dr. El-Sayed leading, and he is increasingly seen by Democrats as a favorite as voters prepare to make their picks. In the final stretch, the candidates are speaking about each other in sharply critical terms. Their supporters can be even more severe. It's the threats, it's the ugliness, said Representative Debbie Dingell of Michigan, a Democrat who was neutral in the Senate primary. You have to worry about security. You don't know who could try to disrupt. Events are very scary right now. In a recent interview with Amani Al-Khattabah, founder of the MuslimGirl.com, Dr. El-Sayed called Ms. Stevens the least capable candidate in America. Ms. Stevens responded on social media in part by saying, everyone in America understands you want to blame all of your problems on Jewish Americans. The race has divided prominent Democrats and drawn a flood of outside money, nearly all of it to help Ms. Stevens, including more than $60 million in pro-Stevens super PAC ads. For the Democratic Party's left, the race is a chance to notch its most significant victory yet in a primary season when progressives, anti-establishment candidates have made inroads. For centrists, the race is an opportunity to steer the party toward what it sees as a stronger blueprint for November. Ms. Stevens, a moderate from the Detroit suburbs who was first elected in the 2018 Democratic wave, says she is best equipped to prevail in November against former Representative Mike Rogers, the Republican candidate who does not face primary opposition. She and her allies are emphasizing her focus on Michigan and casting Dr. El-Sayed as someone more interested in his national image with views that could alienate swing voters. Dr. El-Sayed, who would be the first Muslim senator if elected this fall, is a progressive who lost the 2018 primary for governor, and in the years since has written a book and hosted a podcast. He is positioning himself as a champion for the working class and as a fighter against corporate interests. He wants to abolish ICE and is sharply critical of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, which through its main super PAC has spent more than $30 million on ads backing Ms. Stevens. In the final weekend of campaigning, the candidates traded more blows with Dr. El-Sayed accusing Ms. Stevens of running a flailing campaign and Ms. Stevens arguing that she was the only candidate who can keep Michigan blue. The harsh tenor of the race has the party on edge on the eve of the primary. It just strikes me that he's maybe in a dark spot and throwing shots, Mr. Stevens said of her rival during a recent interview at a campaign stop in Muskegon. Do you think if I had a job, I would have gone? Moroccan migrants described their despair at their economic future, explaining what propelled them across the border with Spain. This is an article by Ben Hubbard and Ida Alami. When King Mohammed VI sorry, it's in Roman numerals. I think VI is 6. Of Morocco addressed his people on Wednesday to commemorate his 27th year on the throne. He spoke hopefully of his North African nation's future. Morocco, he said, was safe and stable with a growing economy making strides in tourism, investment, and manufacturing. This is a pivotal moment in our nation's development, the 62-year-old monarch said, a time when confidence and optimism should prevail over despair and frustration. Over the next 2 days, however, tens of thousands of his citizens tried to escape the country. Driven by a bleak sense of their prospects in Morocco, they braved confrontations with police and dangerous swims in the sea to reach the Spanish territory of Ceuta, Ceuta, I'm guessing how to pronounce that, hoping for better lives. I tried to work and have a job and make a living, but there is nothing for me here, said Mohammed Kanami, a 21-year-old construction worker who had been forced back to Morocco. If I don't leave this country, there is nothing that will save me. Mr. Kanani is part of a sudden exodus that began on Thursday when 50 to 60,000 migrants began forcing their ways into Ceuta, a tiny Spanish territory on the North African coast. By Saturday, many of the migrants had left, lacking food and water, and the Spanish security forces expelled others, but not before the crisis had given the far right politicians across Europe new ammunition to blast their opponents' views on immigration. The Spanish authorities said on Sunday that they had recorded 72 deaths during the crisis. The Moroccan government reported 11 deaths. Both sides said most of the deaths were from drowning. Before the startling scenes of chaos at the border, the Moroccan government had much to celebrate: investments in logistics and industry, preparations to co host the Men's World Cup in 2030, and strong relations with President Trump, who has lavished the country of 38 million and its monarch with praise. But the Ceuta crisis exposed a deep dismay among its young people who, when faced with scant job opportunities, recurrent droughts, and frequent arrests of government critics, chose to vote with their feet and get out. Do you think if I had a job I would have gone? Snapped Alam Al Adnan, 22, when asked where she had worked before she set off for Ceuta. She sat in the sun near the border on Sunday, looking exhausted. She had swum to the territory with her 4 siblings, including her 8-year-old brother, she said. In Ceuta, they hid in a forest but got hungry, so she went to look for food, got detained, and was sent back to Morocco. Over the weekend, thousands of the returned migrants, most of them young Moroccan men, wandered the streets of the Moroccan town of Fenedje. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. Resting on sidewalks and sleeping in open lots. Most wore t-shirts and sandals and carried a few possessions, if any. Teams of policemen in black uniforms swept through the town, pushing the migrants out of public areas and bundling those who resisted into vans. Outside of the town, dozens of buses stood near a gas station filling up with captured migrants who would be ferried back to their home regions. Anxious relatives of migrants who had set off for Ceuta had never returned sat along the road hoping for news. When groups of newly returned migrants walked by, the relatives would show them photos of their missing loved ones in case anyone had seen them. Abdul Khalek Muma and his wife Kartar Alalej asked about their eldest son, Saeed, 18. He had recently finished high school but had not been accepted to university programs in engineering, aviation, and architecture, his father said. He wanted to study in Europe, but the family could not afford it. When the family saw the news on social media that migrants were entering Ceuta, the parents drove their son to the border, they said, hoping this would be his chance. They hadn't heard from him since. Other people went to Europe and benefited from it, said Mr. Mahmoud, 50. We already wasted our lives in Morocco. We don't want him to. The migrants' determination to leave made it clear that Morocco, often considered a North African success story, has failed to deliver hope for many of its youth. The country is politically stable, attractive to foreign investors and tourists, and a valued partner of the United States. That relationship has deepened since Mr. Trump's first term, when Morocco joined a small group of Arab states that established diplomatic relations with Israel. In tandem, the Trump administration endorsed Morocco's claim of sovereignty over Western Sahara, a disputed On a back street in Venedig, Mohammed Saeed, 36, said he had come to the coast with those headed for Ceuta. He had quit school after seventh grade and worked in construction, but had not found stable employment. By the time he reached the border, he said chaos reigned, with cars on fire and migrants clashing with security forces, so he had hung back. He had tried to swim to the territory twice last year, he said, but the Moroccan authorities stopped him. This time, he had come prepared with a can of tuna, some crackers, a phone charger, comb, two extra t shirts, and a plastic sleeve for his cell phone, all in a plastic bag. I'll try again, he said. It's in God's hands. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Asia's tourist hotspots are missing a staple: Europeans. Soaring airfares and disruptions to Middle Eastern travel hubs are keeping many travelers away from destinations in Cambodia, Thailand, and Indonesia. This is an article by John Yoon and Muktida Suaratono. Kon Moni normally shuttles at least 4 groups of tourists on his tuk-tuk to the ancient stone spires of Angkor Wat in Cambodia each week, but in all of May he did not get a single customer. He blames the war raging more than 3,000 miles away in the Middle East. Since the United States and Israel attacked Iran in late February, airfares have soared, doubled on some routes, and the fighting has repeatedly disrupted flights at the commercial aviation hubs of Dubai and Doha. While the tourism industries of Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand have largely been resilient because of regional travel, some towns and cities that rely on European travelers have suffered. Many European tourists have canceled trips to those hotspots in favor of holidays closer to home in recent months, travel industry officials said. This has imposed immense financial difficulties on Mr. Cohn, 30. Each time he prepared his 7-month-old baby's formula, he said he used 1 scoop of powdered milk instead of the recommended 2.5, so he could stretch a can from 10 days to 3 weeks. I worry that my daughter is not healthy because I cannot give her enough milk like before, said Mr. Cohn as he looked out across a quiet street in Siem Reap, a major tourism hub in Cambodia. The fallout from the war is the most jarring disruption to Southeast Asia's vital tourism industry since the COVID pandemic, according to travel industry officials. In Cambodia, international arrivals in the first 3 months of this year declined by 45% compared with the same period last year, tourism officials said. Mr. Cohn said that he used to earn an average of about 82,000 Cambodian rial, or $20 a day, ferrying visitors. That has now dropped to less than $5 a day. Businesses at Siem Reap Angkor International Airport have slashed work hours. Lam Lan, 25, a cook at an airport restaurant, said his shifts had been cut from 30 days a month to around 20 days since March. His monthly earnings dropped from $250 to less than $150. After factoring in gasoline costs and debt payments, Mr. Lam said he had just enough to buy soy milk for his 1-year-old daughter while his wife was pregnant with their second child. I am worried about my second baby because I do not have money saved for his birth, Mr. Lam said. Kron Kim Sang, 59, a tour guide who has led Spanish speaking travelers through Angkor Wat for more than 30 years, said he was making 35% less than what he did before the Iran war started. To compensate, he started growing vegetables and raising chickens to reduce his food expenses. My income now is only enough for survival, he said. In neighboring Thailand's Pangao province, there is a similar crisis. Hotel bookings there have dropped by about 50% since the war began, local officials said. At Surakai Pier, the main gateway for boat tours to Koh Khao Phan Kan, an island that featured in a James Bond film, the financial damage was visible, where a steady procession of minibuses and long-tail boats once carried thousands of tourists a day. Dozens of vessels now sit idle, rocking quietly at their moorings. I don't know how long we can survive, said Chanifa Lakleum, 46, who collects the pier's boat fees of 10 Thai baht, or about 30 cents. There had been almost no trips to collect fees from since the war began, she said. Her husband, a boat operator for 16 years, has not had any customers since April, she said. The family now relies entirely on her 243 monthly wage. She said she stopped along the roadside every evening on her way home to forage for wild ivy gourd leaves and melangio fruit to boil into a basic soup for her husband and two children. We used to go out over the weekend for entertainment with the kids. We used to eat out, Miss Chanape said. Not anymore. It's a luxury we cannot afford. Rungrat Hayolek, 53, who has run boat tours in Fananga, sorry for my pronunciation, for 30 years, said that with the European tourists gone, residents were cutting non-essential expenses. He said his monthly earnings had dropped from about $900 to $300, and he was forced to burn through most of his savings. When his teenage daughter asked to go on a vacation during a recent school break, he asked her to buy a snack at the nearest convenience store. That, he said, was the only outing they could afford. Things look so bleak right now, Mr. Rungrat said. All I can do is pray and be patient. Pardoned by Trump, a former president faces justice in Honduras. Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former leader, faces fraud and money laundering charges after a Trump pardon overturned a drug trafficking sentence. This article by Joan Suazu and Emiliano Rodriguez Mega. Just 8 months ago, Orlando Hernandez was beginning a 45-year prison sentence in a West Virginia federal penitentiary for sweeping drug trafficking and weapons charges. Now, Mr. Hernandez is back on home soil to face justice in his country. A former president of Honduras, he was extradited to the United States in 2022 following charges of operating his country as a narco state and saying that he would shove the drugs right up the noses of gringos by flooding the United States with cocaine. 2 years ago, he was found guilty in a U.S. federal court, but after his family and right-wing political operatives lobbied for his release, President Trump granted him a pardon in November. Today I came back to my homeland, Mr. Hernandez, who served as his country's leader from 2014 to 2022, told a crowd of cheering supporters upon his return just over a week ago. I came to be just another Honduran who builds, uplifts, and unifies both inside and outside my party. However, his homecoming starts a new legal battle. Despite having his U.S. conviction wiped clean and delaying his return home until after Honduran arrest warrant against him was suspended, Mr. Hernandez remains a target in an enormous anti-corruption investigation in Honduras, known as the Pandora case. The inquiry centers on a network of lawmakers and high-ranking politicians who, from 2010 to 2013, are said to have diverted public funds meant for social programs, agriculture, and poverty reduction. They then funneled that money, Honduran prosecutors say, into private foundations to finance political campaigns, including Mr. Hernandez's successful 2013 presidential bid. He has maintained that the accusations against him are politically motivated. Here is what to know as Mr. Hernandez stepped back into the spotlight to face Honduran justice. What did a U.S. court find him guilty of? Less than 3 weeks after Mr. Hernandez stepped down in 2022 from his second presidential term, U.S. authorities requested his arrest and extradition from the newly installed left-wing government in Honduras. Shortly after, elite police units surrounded his home in Tegucigalpa, the capital, and he was flown in handcuffs to the United States. In 2024, a federal court in New York found Mr. Hernandez guilty of using Honduras as a primary transit hub for 400 tons of U.S.-bound cocaine and authorizing the use of machine guns and grenade launchers to protect a drug trafficking emporium. In court, Judge P. Kevin Castell called Mr. Hernandez a two-faced politician hungry for power who posed as an anti-drug warrior while secretly partnering with traffickers. Before being sentenced, Mr. Hernandez insisted that he had been the target of a political persecution. It's as if I had been thrown into a deep river with my hands bound, he said. U.S. prosecutors also said that Mr. Hernandez received millions of dollars of drug money from criminal actors, including from the notorious Mexican drug lord Joaquin Guzman Loera, also known as El Chapo. Why did Trump pardon him? Mr. Hernandez's case was taken up by conservative figures like Roger G. Stone Jr., who was himself pardoned by Mr. Trump in 2020. Mr. Stone, a longtime friend and ally of Mr. Trump, admitted to personally delivering a pardon request to the White House in 2025, arguing that the political left had wrongfully framed Mr. Hernandez. So the investigation into Mr. Hernandez's ties with drug traffickers primarily took place during Mr. Trump's first term. The White House said he had been set up and targeted because he was opposed to the values of the Biden administration. There was virtually no independent evidence provided. Mr. Trump's press secretary, Carolyn Levitt, told reporters after the pardon in December, adding that Mr. Hernandez's conviction relied heavily on the testimony of admitted criminals seeking reduced sentences. Mr. Trump's pardon also coincided with his endorsement of a right-wing presidential candidate from Mr. Hernandez's party, Nasri Asfura, who went on to win last year's election. A marijuana giant that won over Trump has found enemies closer to home. Concerns about polluted water and excessive runoff and the pervasive smell of cannabis in a small Florida town have made the company Trulieve the target of local criticism and state investigations. This article is by David Oval. The watermelon farms and cattle pastures disappeared years ago from tiny Wakena, Florida. Now it's known for something else, the pungent odor of marijuana emanating from a sprawling grow operation run by Trulieve, a cannabis industry giant. Neighbors grumbled about the smell, the drone of machinery, and the bright lights piercing the night from the time Trulieve started harvesting marijuana here in 2020. Their complaints drew little attention in rural Jefferson County near Tallahassee in north central Florida. Then came the Facebook video. The clip posted online this spring showed greenish water gushing from the Trulieve property onto the adjacent property of Felicia and James Lamb. The video, posted by a relative of the couple, galvanized the county residents against Trulieve, whose well-connected chief executive helped persuade President Trump to reclassify medical marijuana in April as a less dangerous drug. It was shocking to people, Felicia Lamb said of the video. People had heard about the runoff, but it's another thing for them to see it. Residents soon packed Jefferson County Commission meetings to complain about the smell and raise concerns that water from the 1 million square foot indoor cannabis operation, one of the largest in the United States, was contaminating the soil. Trulieve officials have insisted that the water is safe, nothing more than normal runoff that flowed onto land property long before the company opened its cultivation campus. The officials have also noted that Trulieve has reduced the smell wafting from its facility by halting marijuana composting on site in recent months and installing powerful filtration systems. When a neighbor brings us a problem, we will keep working until we've done everything reasonably within our power, Trulieve's chief production officer, Kyle Landrum, wrote last month in an opinion piece in the Tallahassee Democrat, a response to Felicia Lamb's own piece published days earlier criticizing the company. The recent furor has prompted investigations into Trulieve operation by several state agencies. It has also divided a rural community that is already grappling with change and is now reconciling itself to an industry that employs nearly 300 people locally, but remains anathema to many. I don't need drugs to enjoy my life, but apparently some do. That's their business, said Nancy Gebhardt, 73, a retiree who lives across the road and often avoids going outside because of the smell. Don't force it on me. I shouldn't have to put up with their stink. Ms. Gebhardt and her husband said they want to sell their longtime home in Wakena, which has fewer than 200 residents, but that potential buyers don't want to live near Trulieve. The tension in Jefferson County echoes community pushback to the data centers springing up around the country. As the nation's cannabis industry has grown, so have complaints from neighbors of cultivation facilities, but typically in blue states such as California and Massachusetts, where both medical and recreational weed are legal. In Florida, marijuana is legal only for medicinal purposes. Trulieve, based in Tallahassee, became the first cannabis company to trade on major U.S. stock exchange in June, a move enabled by Mr. Trump's loosening of restrictions for medical marijuana. It operates nearly a quarter of the dispensaries in Florida and spent nearly $150 million supporting a 2024 ballot measure seeking to legalize recreational marijuana. Jerry Loudermilk, 49, a Jefferson County resident, worked at a Tallahassee Target before accepting a job at Trulieve as a cleaner. There's a few around here that don't care for us right now, he said. As far as I'm certain, I love it. He just completed his 5th year on the job. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York section, from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Again, I have taken the liberty of shortening some articles. To hear them entirely, the number to call is 716-821-5555. Trump's meddling in the Justice Department causes problems of his own making. In the past week alone, President Trump's interference has imperiled one criminal case, set the stage for sanctions in a second, and hindered the confirmation chances for his pick for Attorney General. This article by Alan Feuer. From the moment President Trump was reelected, he has muscled his way into the driver's seat at the Justice Department, leaving tread marks on its time-honored independence from the White House by demanding and sometimes directing investigations into his enemies. But his tight grip on the steering wheel has often threatened to lead the department off a cliff. Last week offered a particularly vivid portrait of the consequences of Mr. Trump's meddling, which in the span of only a few days imperiled one criminal case, set the stage for sanctions in a second, and gummed up the chances that his pick for Attorney General will be confirmed by the Senate. Mr. Trump has long believed that he is his own best advisor and that, as the leader of the executive branch, he enjoys complete control over the agencies beneath him. But there is reason the department in charge of federal law enforcement has traditionally stood outside the president's personal purview, said Norman L. Eisen, a lawyer involved in some of the recent cases who, early in his career, worked on the Obama administration's no contact policy with the Justice Department. When presidents meddle in the department, Mr. Eisen said, it tends to disrupt its normal functionings. The problems began last week on Wednesday when lawyers for James B. Comey, the former FBI director, filed court papers revealing that Secret Service agents who questioned their clients about a photograph he posted showing seashells on a beach arranged to read 8647 were ordered to quickly send a summary of the interview to Mr. Trump on Air Force One. The interview was a hot topic on the plane, and the president was very interested, the filing said. In fact, it added Mr. Trump wanted to use the agent's notes as fodder at a coming media appearance, even though they presumably contained sensitive and unverified investigative information. The request for the notes was a shocking breach of the distance that most presidents have kept from the day-to-day oversight of criminal investigations and indicated the intensity of Mr. Trump's personal involvement in the pursuit of Mr. Comey, one of his most rivaled political adversaries. But his insistence on interfering with the case could come back to haunt him. After all, Mr. Comey's lawyers pointed to the episode as evidence that the Justice Department had indicted him on charges of making threats against the president only as an act of retribution. If that claim is proven true, it would result in the case being dismissed. Mr. Trump's intrusive instincts also played a role last week in the demise of another criminal case, one that accused the former Olympic canoeist David Hearn with vandalizing one of the president's pet projects, the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool. When Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney in Washington, announced that the indictment of Mr. Hearn last month, she made it clear the charges had been brought, at least in part, because Mr. Trump wanted them. This is not only a priority for the president, she told reporters, but for myself. On Friday night, however, the case fell apart in a spectacular fashion. Ms. Pirro, in a court filing, suddenly acknowledged that the new information from Mr. Trump's Interior Department had made her realize that shoddy construction, not anything that Mr. Hearn had done, caused the problems with the pool's lining. But even that confession did not stop Mr. Trump from doubling down on his vandalism narrative. On Saturday morning, he posted a message on social media saying that he disagreed entirely with Ms. Pirro, a veteran prosecutor and a friend of his for more than 40 years. I don't know what she was thinking, Mr. Trump wrote. While Mr. Hearn's lawyers have not disclosed what they might do next, the case's collapse gives them an opening to argue that the president's stubborn statements about the matter suggest the prosecution was vexatious, frivolous, or brought in bad faith. Should a move like that succeed, it would add to the roster of Ms. Pirro's values to go after Mr. Trump's enemies, a list that already included 6 Democratic lawmakers accused of sedition by the president after they posted a video reminding military personnel of their obligations to ignore illegal orders. It would also allow Mr. Hearn to recoup legal fees for the cast of lawyers he hired to defend himself. The president also intervened on another important bit of business at the Justice Department, the effort to confirm Todd Blanche, Mr. Trump's personal lawyer, as Attorney General. I'm going to skip the rest because that really was covered in another article. 2 deaths linked to cyclosporosis in Michigan. The patients had significantly underlying health conditions, health officials said. This article by Caroline Hopkins Legaspi. Health officials in Michigan have linked 2 deaths to cyclosporosis, an intestinal illness caused by the parasite Cyclospora. These are the first fatalities associated with a 9-state outbreak connected to iceberg lettuce supplied by Taylor Farms, a spokeswoman for the Centers of Disease Control Prevention said. Both of the people who died had significant underlying health conditions that may have been impacted by cyclosporosis and dehydration, according to an update posted to the Michigan Health Department's website. Michigan, which is at the center of the 9-state outbreak, has reported 11,234 cases and 193 hospitalizations. John Guzwich, who worked on foodborne disease outbreaks at the Food and Drug Administration from 1997 to 2011, said he was not aware of any other instances where the CDC had reported deaths in the United States linked to the parasite, which spreads through food or water contaminated with human feces. This is unprecedented, he said. The infection, which causes severe diarrhea that can last from a few days to a month or more, is typically treated with antibiotics. Deaths from cyclosporosis are atypical in the United States, said Matthew Moore, a food safety microbiologist at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. But lengthy bouts of diarrhea can be dangerous for vulnerable groups, including infants, older adults, and those who are pregnant or have weakened immune systems. The deaths come during the worst year on record for cyclosporosis in the United States. Since May 1st, the CDC has confirmed or is investigating more than 18,000 cases in 45 states and has reported 423 hospitalizations. Health officials in Michigan say they are cautiously optimistic that the outbreak in their state is starting to wane, though. During the weeks that began on July 13th and 20th, Michigan reported around 3,500 new cases per week. Last week, the state's health department reported just over 2,000 cases. We have growing confidence that the outbreak is declining, said Lena Stebbins, a spokeswoman for Michigan's health department, but health experts say it is still too early to tell whether cases nationwide are headed in a similar direction. After consuming contaminated food or water, it can take weeks for someone to develop cyclospora symptoms and receive a positive test. That means that older cases are now just being counted may continue to contribute to the rise in cases nationally, even after the source of the contamination is gone from the food. Now ending up on a little science. Archaeologists find hundreds of ancient glyphs in the Amazon. The geometric earthwork structures carved into the ground with embankments and ditches are in some cases more than 2,500 years old, researchers said. Flying over the southwestern Amazon, archaeologists have discovered hundreds of ancient monumental designs carved in the earth that hinted at complex societies in the rainforest a millennium before Spanish and Portuguese colonists arrived. The research published this week in the journal Nature shows circles, squares, and other geometric figures, some with connecting roads beneath the forest canopy, with nearly 400 previously unknown earthworks in all. Many are formations that archaeologists call geoglyphs and date from between 600 BC to 850 AD. All of them add to evidence contradicting the depiction of the Amazon as largely untouched expanse before the arrival of the Europeans in the 15th century. To see under the dense canopy near the borders of Bolivia, Brazil, and Peru, the researchers used a laser scanning technology called LIDAR, an acronym for light detection and ranging, which archaeologists and other scholars around the world have used to map sites invisible to the naked eye. The geoglyphs, shaped by embankments, mounds, and trenches, vary in size. Most span 7 acres, including many with ditches 30 feet wide and 15 feet deep. The biggest figure sprawls across more than 120 acres. This is an important and ambitious study based on exceptionally extensive LIDAR coverage for this region, which reveals the remarkable scale of the pre-Columbian landscape modification in southwestern Amazonia, said Jose Iriarte, an archaeologist at the University of Exeter who was not involved in the research. Further excavation, he said, would be crucial in investigating the geoglyphs, which in many ways remain mysterious, including how they were used and whether they were associated with residents, ceremonies, or other activities. Drawing in part on oral accounts from Apurina Nation, the indigenous group that lives in the center of the earthwork area, the researchers said the designs likely had several purposes. We are quite sure that those are used for festivities, political occasions, ceremonies, dance, music, and also competition like ball games, said Marty Parsinen, the lead author and an emeritus professor at the University of Helsinki. Dr. Parsinen's team also suggested that at the peak of the Akwari Society between 100 and 300 AD, the total population of this region may have reached up to 3 million people. Population estimates are a subject of intense and sometimes thorny debate among researchers. Some experts said that the latest study's proposal should be treated with caution since it extrapolates not from excavated settlements but from a number of other factors like how many earthwork sites may be in the region and how many people were probably needed to build and maintain them. But most scientists now hold that the 16th century accounts of dense populations were not as far fetched as many generations believed. They thought that it was the imagination of Carvajal and the expedition of Orellana, which saw really huge settlements, Dr. Parsinian said. Oh, you have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the August 4th issue of the front section of the New York Times. We read from the front section of the New York Times every Sunday at 1. Your reader has been Patrice. It has been my pleasure to read to you. And again, the number to call 716-821-5555 to hear any articles that I abbreviated. Thank you and have a wonderful day.